Dear panelists, starting from the right, we would like you to share a little bit of information about yourselves and what your organizations are doing to achieve the SDGs.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Moderator, and I want to congratulate George Tsifakis, Tess Mateo, and of course my good friend Sergio and many others who are here to energize all of us about the SDGs. I think we all know that the SDGs are kind of really aspirational goals. We have a target of 2030. The pandemic has actually really messed up that progress. If you look around, we had hoped, and by around 2019, we were kind of progressing well. Now I'm sorry to tell you in a stark way that we are set back in such a way that we are unlikely to achieve these goals by 2030, but actually it's worse. We might add another 40 years at the pace we are going. The pandemic has meant that funding is no longer being channeled to the developing countries. Understandably, rich countries are focusing on their own citizens. So monies to invest in the poorer countries has been lacking. And what we do is we focus on building public-private partnerships that can accelerate that progress. It's not easy, I can assure you. Partnerships is a good buzzword. You all talk about it, saying we must partner together. When it comes down to it, it's about relationship building. It's about how you can work with the other side, get them engaged, hear what they have to say and what they want to do, and then find a way to fast-track it. That's what we do at the Global Partnerships Forum, and I'm going to stop here so that other colleagues can say something, and then we can come back to your other questions. Thank you very much indeed.
Hi, I'm Boaz Paldi. I'm the Chief Creative Officer for the United Nations Development Program. My job and my mission is to try and bring what UNDP does and what UNDP cares about to the largest possible audience across the globe. For this, of course, kind of like, partnerships are essential. Media partnerships, various other partnerships are essential. UNDP's work is entirely related to the SDGs. Everything we do is the SDGs. The SDGs are our blood, our DNA. It's how we mark our time and our days. And achieving them is, of course, kind of like a very difficult proposition at this point, as Amir has said. We have some very, very large looming crises that face us. We've got wars in various places, 50 conflicts around the world at this time. Not only the Ukraine war, but many, many others that we seem to have a little bit of forgotten about, like the Syria war, the Yemen war, South Sudan. There's lots and lots of places that are in turmoil at the moment. But more than that as well, we have the looming crisis in climate that we need to tackle as quickly as we possibly can. So all that leads us to a need to outreach, to advocate, to communicate as much as we can around these issues. Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, CX Catalyst is public-private partnerships in clean energy, sustainable food, health, as well as enabling technologies. This specific meeting, called the Global Green Inclusive Innovation Summit, was actually birthed in 2012 after Rio Plus 20. And in that, the first and only other time we held this, was to launch 10,000 women in the green economy, specifically in the emerging markets at the base of the pyramid. Why we looked at that as an opportune time to do that was because the commitments that were made in Rio Plus 20 was such that there was all this commitments from the large corporations, and they wanted to do something for women. And we thought that given that we're focused on a sustainable 2050 in which 9 billion people can live well within the limits of the planet, it was really, really important that we get this other half of the population engaged as well as thriving in this new sector. What's interesting right now is, yes, it's very dark and it seems very bad, but it's also a very, very exciting time. Everything broke during COVID, and it's an unbelievable time to rebuild. So the reason why this summit, or this G2I2 was convened specifically between UNGA 77, COP27, and the G20, is that in the G20 meetings in Italy last year, there was a very specific initiative for women's economic empowerment, and that initiative was to make sure all the G20 countries sourced the groups that were most harmed by COVID, all the minorities, that they would double their spend. So the White House, the Biden White House, issued M2203 that said to double anyone who serves, anyone who markets to the U.S. government, to double their spend on women-owned and as well as minority-owned businesses. In the same sense, UNDP just issued the Inclusive Procurement Playbook. So here you have the largest government in the world with the largest budget, making this huge commitment to double their spend on minorities, and then you have the playbook in which there, and the UNDP gets all the member states behind them, gets all the large corporates saying this is how you do it. And so we thought that this is a perfect time that we are going to show and highlight what women are doing around the world, as well as governments to support them. Thank you.
Good morning again. Thank you so much for our esteemed panelists here. Just really excited to be here. Public Foundation is an organization that started 10 years ago with the idea that there's not enough money to solve every problem, but there is enough media, data, and technology to educate, empower, and engage everyone to solve every problem. We pride ourselves on powering new possibilities for social impact, and over the last 10 years, we've been doing work, and work has reached over 100 countries and worked with many UN agencies and really billions of humans impacted through the various campaigns and initiatives. And one of our marquee programs that we're working on is with Mr. Boaz Paldi. And you'll see George wearing the dinosaur SDG pin. So if you do take a picture with him with that pin, it's supporting climate action, and that's Frankie the Dinosaur and Don't Choose Extinction, as well as we run the SDG.org. If anyone is interested in data, SDG.org is the data hub for all the SDGs and supporting and advancing not just the UN system, but also the governments. So that's just a little bit of high level, what are we up to? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. I know we all have busy schedules, so taking time out of your day to participate in important conversations is a great, hopefully, break from the day-to-day. And George, thank you for inviting Points of Light to be part of this conversation. Points of Light, our mission is to inspire, equip, and mobilize people to take action that changes the world, which is a pretty big mission. So how do we do that? We do that by working with over 170 NGOs in 38 countries that help to mobilize people to volunteer, to serve, to donate for causes that they care about. And we also work with Fortune 500 companies to help with their employee engagement strategies and activities so that their employees can support causes that they care about, use their unique talents and skills that they bring to work every day to support those causes, and be better engaged with their companies and in their communities. We also do research, which I will say has shown us over the last 3 years that people really do want to be involved and engaged and take action. They just don't know quite how to do that. So the resources, the assets, the talent, it's out there. It's waiting to be tapped. And I think that that's going to be critical, as the UN has stated in several of their reports, in order for us to achieve any of the SDG goals. So thank you again for having us.
Tell us a little bit about some of your organization's strategies and approaches towards the SDGs, and how are they creating synergies and complementing the private sector?
Thank you. I just want to go back to what the Secretary General and the Deputy Secretary General have said, that governments alone can't do it. No single organization, no entity can really achieve these goals. And the only way to do it is what we're discussing today, is about collaboration and partnerships. So, and the other aspect I want to say that what Boaz and Sergio are doing is about using the power of media to tell the story. You can have a great product, but if you don't package it, it doesn't sell. Nobody knows about it. And the way Boaz and UNDP and Public Foundation are projecting the climate issues through the dinosaur movement is unbelievable. It shows that, and I'm sorry to tell you, in this house, they've not achieved 2 billion views like Boaz and his team have achieved, for example, getting the message out. So how do you build these partnerships? You really need to take the political leadership, but also the management skills and the sort of supply chain capabilities of the private sector. You also need NGOs on the ground to engage them so that there is transfer of knowledge taking place. And of course, you need the power of media. I would recommend whilst we all like to think big, don't think big. Think small, start small, and then replicate. Often we announce grand plans, have press conferences, and say we're going to change the world. But then 1 year later, 2 years later, you find out what's the outcome? It's limited outcome. If you start small, you can grow it because people will say, oh, how are you doing this? What's your experience in this? Can I do it in my side? Because not everybody has the capacity to put in $10 million or even $1 million. But I bet you in this room, most of you, if you had an opportunity to put $10,000 into something which will change the world, which will impact society in a way where you can help some underprivileged community down the road, and you publicize it, you use the power of media to showcase it, then magic can happen. Thank you.
I think Amir said exactly right. We can't do it ourselves. The UN cannot achieve the SDGs by itself. Governments can't achieve the SDGs by themselves. NGOs can't achieve the SDGs by themselves. Private sector can't achieve the SDGs by themselves. No single player can. It's not only a matter of resources; it's also a matter of know-how. There's a lot of complexities that need to be taken care of, and so we need everyone to be involved. Literally everyone to be involved. This is not kind of like an issue of northern hemisphere versus southern hemisphere. It's not an issue of poor versus rich. The SDGs are everyone's plan for a better future for our planet, but it's everyone's plan. And so everyone needs to be involved. What I think is the transition that's happened is that the United Nations has realized that that is the case, and we need those partnerships. And it's people like Public that facilitate those kind of partnerships, and others as well, that really kind of can make this happen. We are not necessarily built for partnership, the United Nations, but we're learning, and we know that that's the only way that we can move forward. So it's absolutely essential. It's essential for my work because my work is essentially has to do with outreach and communication and media, and so the reach that we can have by ourselves is very, very limited. The reach with partners is enormous.
So when we set up the first Global Green Inclusive Innovation Summit, and how could we launch 10,000 women? I belong to an organization called BPW International. We're a membership of about 35,000 women in about 75 countries. It's a 90-year-old organization, has status here at ECOSOC. And what's amazing is when you activate 30,000 women on the ground in all these countries, you actually touch well over millions and millions of families and women around the world. And I'm so blessed that my colleagues, my friends and sisters from Italy and Iceland are here. They flew in, as well as Germany, because what we do is we live the partnership. We couldn't achieve anything without partnerships. Because we are the minority. So what we do is, specifically, is we take commitments that corporates make So right now, that just happened during Climate Week, which just happened during the UN General 77, was that you had corporates who made a net zero commitment. That means they're going to reduce their carbon emissions to achieve our goal to be a sustainable 2050. But they also made a supplier diversity because everyone saw the harm of which the minority communities, and so you have all of these corporates who also made these commitments to diversify their supply chains. What you also did was you also had governments who made the same commitment, who opened up and freed up money. So Goldman Sachs estimates $56 trillion is going to be used or invested to achieve a net zero future. So if the world is going to spend that much money, our groups, anyone who's affiliated with the G2, I2, and anyone we touch, is that we want at least 30% of that $56 trillion to help and support minority-owned businesses. And so that's what we call the Equality Moonshot. By 2025, NASA, in their Artemis program, is going to launch and land the first woman on the moon as well as the first person on the moon. Wouldn't it be wonderful if behind them you could see thousands of businesses owned by minorities also benefiting from that moonshot? Thank you.
So the question is, in what ways does your organization approach the SDGs, create synergies that complement the private sector, right? And I kind of like to turn that around because it's not about complementing the private sector. It's what can the private sector do to advance the Sustainable Development Goals. And a lot of the work that we do is, it kind of helps shift the thinking because the private sector, if rooted with the right DNA, can actually be part of the solution. And, as Amir was talking about, and Boas was talking about, and Tessa's talking about, it's like we need all the different stakeholders. We're a big fan of multi-stakeholder platforms, multi-stakeholder governance, multi-stakeholder engagement, which means that the private sector needs to play a role at the center of it. And it's not for, to complement them. Because if you look at the evolution, and I'm a capitalist at heart, and I am somebody who's been an entrepreneur since I was 12, building businesses, it's about doing it right. It's about actually showing them that there's a way not to create a problem to then say, I'm going to donate to create a solution to the problem I've created. Rather, let's educate the next generation of business leaders. Let's educate the next generation of entrepreneurs. Let's make sure that we have agenda balance. Let's make sure that we're including and leaving no one behind, but creating the new business models of tomorrow. To me, the Sustainable Development Goals was an incredible opportunity, especially for my generation, because I looked at the SDGs as an opportunity, especially number 17, and I think all of us here share, which is partnerships, right? That means that we all can do something. It's not about what is she or he going to do, but or what is the government supposed to do. In some places, they're expecting government to take care of it, or they're expecting somebody else to take care of it. Rather, it is all of our responsibilities. And the SDGs really became that framework, right? That framework and the path to saying, okay, now we can solve, we can take action, we can be part of the solution, and we can look at policy, how private sector engages the public sector, how public sector opens the door for innovation from the private sector, how we can grab intellectual property that is being built and creates billions of dollars worth of revenue here and bring that to a least developed country and an evolving economy and give them access to that so that they could create their own economic impact. So to me, it's not about how we're complementing the private sector. It's actually how is the private sector, taking a seat at the table and actually looking at the next opportunity to create economic development that is inclusive and that is advancing the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah. Thank you for that nuance in the language, Sergio, because I wholeheartedly agree. And Points of Light has a long history of working with companies to coordinate and collaborate their civic engagement, the way that their brand takes a stand, the way that they engage their employees in issue areas. We know from the Edelman Trust Barometer over the last easily 5 years, if not more, that trust is eroding among institutions. And as that has continued, employers, who is my employer, has become one of the most trusted institutions for individuals. So companies have an enormous opportunity and a role and really an obligation to be involved in in the SDGs to be involved within their communities. Our own research at Points of Light showed that over 82% of people expect companies to take a stand on issues. Our work with companies over the last decade through a program we have called the Civic 50, it's a third-party run self-reporting that Fortune 500 companies participate in, has given us a number of trends that we use when we do consulting with companies. And what always stands out is the importance of integrating their social impact work, their civic engagement work, with the business strategies that they have and with the talents and the assets that they have within their business. So in our consulting work, that is where we always start first and foremost. And I'll give an example, just recently talking with someone at UPS on how they're narrowing their strategy. I think we all have seen at one time or another mission creep, and this happens within companies. UPS has decided that they're really going to focus on their delivery as their unique asset and how can they deliver more vaccinations. There are a lot of ways that they want to be involved in health equity and bringing healthcare and medical services to individuals in areas where they don't have access, but their unique ability to do that is through their delivery systems. So it's just one example of how companies can focus their strategies and how Points of Light works with them on those strategies. And then the second way that we do that is through our affiliate network of NGOs across the world and connecting them to local change makers, those who know the community, so that any solutions they are creating are co-created with the communities that they are being enacted in.
Close this panel, we're going to end with a personal question to our panelists. We would like you to hear more about your personal relationship with the SDGs. What is important to you and how have they impacted you?
Thank you. My relationship goes back a number of years when I was involved in the establishment of the Millennium Development Goals way back in 2000. And then I was privileged to be part of the conversation, the public consultation process which the UN hosted. And I was part of a group to deal with setting up the kind of successor arrangements to the 8 MDGs, which expired in 2005, actually, or 2015. I think we all often are concerned about poverty around the world, and that remains a biggest challenge. Currently, there are about 880 million people still living below the poverty line of $1.90 a day. So, and the pandemic has put another 264 people, actually, onto that line. So we're struggling in such a way that we probably don't really appreciate, because we don't see poverty around us, except we see a few homeless people around somewhere. But when you talk about 880 million, that's about 15% of the population struggling that way. So our focus has been at the Global Partnerships Forum to try and find ways of how to create, and I hate to use the buzzword, sustainable livelihoods. And we try and do it in small ways. We try and create programs for children who can learn better so that they can grow up and earn better, be healthy, and become part of society. So we focus on that. We also focus on some ways of supporting people who are in extreme hunger situations. But you can do anything you like. Even if you touch one person, you're making that difference. Thank you very much.
I think I had the privilege to be there when the SDGs were being formed, and at some point we got the kind of like the list of the 17 SDGs, and us in communication were obsessed with the idea that 17 is too many because they don't fit on one page. It's a true story. But diving deeper into it, we understand or very quickly understood then that this is the plan for a better future for all of us. It's a better future for our children, for everyone's children. It's what we need to do. It's the agenda that we need to have. There is no doubt that there is so many multiple crises that humanity faces, and it's absolutely vital that we face them head on and be as active and proactive as we possibly can. For me personally, I think, I look at the SDGs, and although all my children are equal, SDG 13 is the one that leaps to mind. That if we do not solve the climate emergency, all the work of everything else that was done will be lost. Amir said very eloquently that the pandemic has put us behind. Imagine what climate change will do to us. So I really kind of want to try and emphasize that there's action needed on all fronts, absolutely, but there's definitely a climate action needed at this time of in our history. Encourage everyone to look at how we can take climate action on a daily basis in our lives, in our businesses, in our jobs, in our personal lives, and it's for us to be able to do. We can do it. We will do it. It's just that we need to get on with it.
I was very fortunate that my background is in corporate restructuring work, so my background is working in the large multinational companies at the very top of the organizations and trying to make as much money as possible, and I was really good at it. What happened was that I chaired this World Business Council for Sustainable Development's Vision 2050 work. And I suggest everyone read that because it was the first time, and this was in 2008, 2010, in which 400 multinational companies in 16 industry sectors and 23 countries all came together and said, what do we need to do for us to be sustainable by 2050? And that's for 9 billion people to live well within the limits of the planet. Out of that became 40 must-haves by 2020, and this was precursor, 2008, 2010, before the SDGs came out. And so one of those was women's economic empowerment, that there is no way that anything is feasible, even in the climate action, without getting half the population engaged and acting towards the same solutions. And so women's economic empowerment, which is SDG 5, which is the SDG that I'm working on the hardest, but also if you looked at the women's economic or empowerment principles, principle number 5 is to source from women-owned companies. So looking at those two became sort of my passion call, but what makes it very easy to, not easy, but there's a very clear roadmap, is when you look at the commitments that corporates make towards DE&I, diversity, equity and inclusion, and their net zero, then you can see where the money is. And that's why I urge everyone to lever up and look at the commitments that companies, organizations, countries, and governments make, because that is, when you follow the money, that's where you can set projects up that you can actually achieve something.
So my relationship with the SDGs, started my foundation around the end of 2011, 2012, and in June of 2012, I had the opportunity to speak in Rio 20 about the power of media to change the world, and I learned about the Sustainable Development Goals, and I felt that spoke to me, that related to my generation, to my entrepreneurial spirit, that I finally had something that I could be a part of and bring my intellectual property, my network. And immediately, right after I came back in June from Rio, restructured the entire governance of my foundation to say that we were only going to work with people that were going to be focused on the Sustainable Development Goals. And this was in 2012, but I felt that it added more purpose to what I was doing by being and doing as soon as I had learned about it and wearing it and breathing it, and became very involved in the communications hub, which was with the DSG, Amina Mohammed, helping bring different people from the media and communications world to look at how we're going to communicate the Sustainable Development Goals, and we're part of the whole ideation of making sure, as you remember, Amir and Boaz, how everybody was fighting over the logos and all the conversations that were going on, and you'd be surprised what was going on behind the scenes. It's fascinating to look back. And then to see that, the Sustainable Development Goals are now, billions and billions of people already know about it. And to sort of close on my relationship with the SDGs is that what's also great about it, and everyone here with your relationship with the SDGs, is that we all can do one thing, right? It's, some of us do more, some of us do less. But the beautiful part about the Sustainable Development Goals is that we all can actually embrace one thing, how it makes our lives better, how we think about our children, how we think about equality, how we think about governance, how we think about engagement of other stakeholders. So I think that, we all could do just that one thing to make the world better. So, embrace that as well, and hopefully you have your own journey with the SDGs.
I love this question and all of the responses, and thinking about your personal journey with the SDGs. Before I was in nonprofits, I was a journalist, so I saw a lot of things. And I've been at Planned Parenthood, I've been at Pew Charitable Trusts on a childhood nutrition program, and obviously at Points of Light. And as a communicator, the SDGs give us a framework, and so just the visuals of it, are greatly appreciated. And the world can be an overwhelming place. And I think having a framework and having some organization around what is ahead of us to tackle is probably what speaks to me the most. And number 17, the number 17 has always been my favorite number. And it is partnerships, which is what we do at Points of Light. So it is deeply connected to the work that we do every day to try and bring together cross-sector partnerships so that we can make a dent and make some progress towards all of the goals.